Now, I'd like to talk about what some people think is the single biggest reason why costs often go out of control, which is bureaucracy. Paperwork, red tape, approvals, permits, the government getting in the way. And this can certainly be an absolutely terrifying problem for many scientific projects, infrastructure projects. Here's an example. This is the Cape Wind Farm that was proposed to be built off the east coast of the United States of America. Sounds great. You're going to have lots of wind turbines, lots of green, efficient energy to help power everything, replace all the coal-fired power plants. Yes, that was the idea. But to build this, the people needed approval from the Cape Cod Commission, the State Department of Environmental Protection, the State Highway Department, the State Office of Transportation, the State Department of Public Utilities, conservation commissions of the two nearest towns, road operating permits from the two nearest towns, the State Energy Facilities Siting Board, the Environmental Impact Statement from the Federal Minerals Management System, which is over 20,000 pages, and so on, and so on, and so forth. Each one of these approvals will require documentation, probably thousands to tens of thousands of pages, which means you need to pay people to write these things, and the government needs to pay people to read them all and approve them all, and every one of these things can then be challenged in court, and frequently is. All of which means this can take years, sometimes decades, and cost many millions of dollars. In this particular case, they got so bogged down with endless approvals and endless lawsuits over the approvals that in the end they just gave up and didn't build it. Here's another example. This is a small modular nuclear reactor by the startup company NuScale. The idea is these small nuclear reactors, intrinsically extremely safe, can be put anywhere you need some power. Unfortunately, they're regulated as if they were full-size nuclear reactors, 300 times bigger, and so they're layer after layer of approvals and check-offs and committees and panels that need to review the whole thing. You have to worry about, is it going to endanger a rare tortoise where it's been built? Is it liable to earthquake damage, even if it's not an earthquake vulnerable zone, and so on, and so on, and so on. In this particular case, they've been delayed at least 5 years so far, and it's cost, so they estimate about $500 million US so far, and that's not building the reactor, that's purely paying people to produce paperwork and answer paperwork and respond to paperwork and go to panel committees and so on. And this may well mean that these reactors never get built, even if they're wonderful things, simply because they're spending too much time and too much money on paperwork, and therefore the company will run out of money and go bankrupt. And there are countless examples of this. This is not isolated cases. Projects of all sorts taking years, sometimes decades to get approval. Documentation of the tens of thousands of pages for environmental impact statements, and all this costs money. The time costs money, and at least in Western countries, this is the rule, not the exception. And project after project stops, is never approved in the first place, or people don't even try in the first place because they know the approvals are going to be too hard. So why? Why do we have such a level of bureaucracy that it often means, for example, Australia at the moment is trying to build its renewable energy grid and can't because it's all hung up in permits and bureaucracy. Every new government comes in and says, we're going to reduce the red tape, we're going to clear the decks and make it go faster, and somehow it never works. And that's telling you that it's not just incompetent governments. There must be some underlying reason why this is so hard to fix. Now, in some cases, the problem is corruption. I'm thinking of like the permit raj in India, or property approvals in many small towns. That there is, let's say you're in a small Australian country town and you need permits to build something, and if you are a bureaucrat, you can get money passed to you in return for giving permits, because the builders might make a lot of money because they have no competition because you've stopped them all with your permits. So you can certainly have a lot of corruption in here, and that's always something you should look out for. But I think, at least in Australia, in most cases it's not corruption that's the problem. The reason for these rules is that they were there to stop problems in the past. Certainly in the past there have been plenty of situations, for example, where a new factory has polluted a stream, or a new freeway has demolished poor people's neighbourhoods in a kind of city, where projects would have benefited from a bit more scrutiny and making sure they were not doing horrible things to the environment or to the people around them. So almost every rule here you can say, yes, I can see why you'd want a rule like that. Some things could go wrong here, and this will stop them going wrong here. But also they've got out of control. I mean, absolutely people should consider the environment when building a new anything. But 30,000 pages of considering the environment? I mean, do you really think you had learned anything from 30,000 pages you wouldn't have learnt from 10 or 100? Apart from blowing out the cost. And very often the environmental impact statement and the bureaucracy means that the thing that's good for the environment, like renewable energy, isn't built, so you have to keep on polluting the environment with the old systems. So why do these things get out of control? I mean, one reason is different levels of government. Very often you have to get approved by local, state and federal government. The different bureaucracies are not talking to each other because they've got no incentive to talk to each other. Often it's weaponized by opponents. Let's say someone objects to having a wind farm that will spoil their view. They may try and pick holes. They may not say, they can't actually say, sorry, I just don't like it because it's going to spoil my view, but they can say, well, you failed to follow procedure here and you didn't follow the letter of the rule here, and bring about lawsuits, which therefore means that the bureaucrats who have to approve these things have to always look over their shoulder. They have to say, if someone's going to fight this, we've got to make sure there are no problems with the procedure at all. Have you considered everything? They have to show they've considered everything. This is why the environmental impact statements are so long. It's so that if someone sues them because you didn't consider tortoises or you didn't consider flickering shadows and whether this affects kestrel nesting 400 kilometers away, you can say, yes, we consider this, we consider that. It's in paragraph 4.5.7.9 or whatever it might be. So fear of lawsuits is a big problem, and a very real problem. Then the incentives for the bureaucrats. Let's say you are a bureaucrat that works for the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. And let's say you approve something and then there's a spill. You could lose your job. But let's say you require the company to make sure there's no spill by spending $100 million on extra special no spill protections for their whatever it is. In that case, the company might go bankrupt and not build the thing, and there won't be the jobs, and there might not be the new renewable energy or whatever it is, but you don't get penalised because there was no spill. So there's always a tendency, if you're a bureaucrat, to put on too many rules because you can get punished if something goes wrong, but you don't normally have to consider whether you've then stopped something good from happening or stopped a new industry forming or whatever it might be. But I think the biggest problem is an inability to acknowledge and apportion costs. When anything new is done, a new transmission line, a new wind turbine, a new nuclear reactor, there are going to be winners and losers. Building new transmission lines is going to be great in terms of giving renewable energy to the country and stopping global warming, but it will spoil the view and occupy some of the farmland of people nearby. So it might be a huge net positive, but it will be a negative for some people. So what you'd like to happen is for the government to weigh this all up. Okay, it's going to have these benefits and these problems, and we've thought about everything. We haven't just glossed over it, and we have concluded that on balance the benefits exceed the disadvantages, and so we should go ahead. But that's very hard. The way the system currently works is anybody who loses can sue, and so they try and develop projects that nobody loses from, which is impossible. Someone's always going to lose from anything new, and at the moment nobody has the power to make the decision. Sure, they should consider all the possibilities, and maybe they can be sued if they don't, but someone needs to make the decision. In the end, weigh up the costs and the benefits and decide yes or no. And there's not really anyone to do that in the current system.